Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and I'm sorry for coming on late. We'll begin with chapter 19, verse 18. Famous phrase from the Torah, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. It certainly is Yom HaZikaron and worth reflecting on those who have fallen in defense of the state of Israel. Thank you for that chat. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your fellow as you love yourself. And we left off yesterday just mentioning it's a difficult mitzvah to think about. How is one supposed to love their fellow like themselves? Ramban says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha haflaga." This is being said somewhat of an exaggerated statement. It's not possible to love another person as much as you love yourself. He makes an additional point, which is very interesting. It's a famous Gemara. I'm sure many of you have heard of it before. The famous scenario where two people are walking in the desert and there's only enough water for one person and you have the water. Are you supposed to take the water for yourself? Are you supposed to share it with someone else? Are you supposed to give it all to someone else? Are you supposed to take it for yourself? Why? Because your own life comes first. So says the Ramban, how do you reconcile the fact that your own life comes first with loving your fellow like yourself? Obviously not. So what is meant by the instruction of loving your fellow like yourself? Elamitza Torah sheyehav chaveiro b'chol inyan kasher ya'avas nafsho b'chol atov. That we should care for our fellow in all aspects like we care for ourselves. And so I think basically the way to think about this is as follows. So I've got a lot of things on my mind. I'm thinking about my parnasa. I'm thinking about my health. I'm thinking about my social connections. I'm thinking about my spirituality, and so on and so forth. And someone calls me up and says, I'm very concerned about so-and-so's social connections. I say, okay, I want to be a good guy. Let's think about that. And, try to figure out how to connect them better to people. Fine. Then someone calls me up tomorrow, different person, and says, the same person that I got a call about yesterday, I'm trying to think of how we can help them with parnasa. So there's a little voice that goes off in someone's head at that moment and says, look, I already did something for somebody yesterday. I did look out for that person yesterday. I am being kind to that person. I can't do everything in the world for that person. My thing for that person is their social connections. Parnasa? Someone else is going to have to worry about their parnasa. That's if we're honest with ourselves, it's a very natural reaction. Says the Ramban, the Torah is teaching me that's not okay. I'm concerned about my life in all aspects of my life. Imagine a person was worried about their parnasa. And, they did whatever they did. They didn't do whatever they didn't do. Then later in the day, they become worried about their social interactions. And they say to themselves, no, I only worried about one thing today for myself. I don't have the mind space. I don't have the time to worry about a second thing in my life. That's not how we are. So Ramban says the Torah is teaching me that the same way that I'm concerned for myself about all aspects of my life, I have to be concerned about all aspects of your life. There's no way I'll be concerned about any of them as much as I'm concerned about my own. It's not possible. But I need to have the across-the-board interest and concern in your life that I would have for my own. If you have to esreacha kamocha, v'hishva osam b'milas lireacha, v'chein v'yahavta lo kamocha deger, shia perusho lahashvos avas shneim bedato. Kipa amim sheyav adam esreahu b'dvarim yuduim la'ativo ba'osher v'lo b'chachma kiyotze b'zeh. V'mya ovo b'kol yachbot sheyizke re'ehu ha'ov lo ba'osher u'b'nechasim v'kavod u'b'das u'b'chachma v'lo yishvei lav avo yechafetz b'libo la'olam sheyu yoser rimenu b'chol atova. The bottom line is, it's not that I should have an equal amount as that person. I'm not looking for that. But in all aspects of my life, I want things to go well. In all aspects of that person's life, I want things to go well. Avo yehav birvos hatova l'chaveiro kasher adam osel l'nafsho v'lo yitain shirim ba'ava. A person should be happy when good things happen to another person. I just want to share, I teach a 2-day a week high school class. I had such an interesting experience the other day that I think is just interesting for all of us to reflect on. So one of the great joys of teaching, particularly teaching high school, is debates with one's class as to yes, a test, no, a test, yes, a quiz, no, a quiz. So I decided they were going to have a quiz. And then they told me that it's a very difficult time for them to have a quiz. And it was reasonable what they said. So they said, you know what? I'm going to give you an open notes quiz this time. And that made the vast majority of the people in the room pretty happy. That was good. And then one person said, yeah, but some of us do have time to study. So could you give us extra credit if we don't use our notes? So this was already getting pretty complicated. And I decided, I guess this was my fulfillment of V'ahavta Re'echa Kamocha. I said, okay, you know what? That's a great idea. You can use your notes, but if you don't use your notes, extra credit. And I thought we had finally made everybody happy. And then I saw that some of the young ladies who had asked for open notes then became disturbed. I said, wait a second. I said, no one's telling you that you can't use your notes. Just if you don't have time to study, you can use your notes. Just if they have time to study, they'll get extra points. And it was very clear that the concept of someone getting points that they weren't going to get bothered them. And I'm just saying, so again, we're not taking quizzes and tests, but that's a very real life emotion if you think about it. I said to them, if there's one thing you learned from my class this year, if 20 years from now you think about this and you tell yourselves, it's okay if someone else gets points that I don't get, that's as good a life lesson as anything else you learn in this class. But it's this thing we always struggle with it. How do we deal? So normally we think of V'ahavta Re'echa Kamocha as what am I doing for you? And that's obviously a very important part of V'ahavta Re'echa Kamocha. But another part of V'ahavta Re'echa Kamocha is how do I feel when you have good things happen to you? How does that hit me when you have something good that I don't have? So the negative way of thinking about that is we shouldn't be people of jealousy. But the positive way of thinking about that is I want to be the kind of person that's happy when something good is happening in your life. Not just I'm not sad. It's just something I think worthy of reflecting on. Okay, let's jump ahead to, and no, when there's a Parsha quiz in this group, there's not going to be any extra credit. Okay, verse 23. V'chi savo'u el ha'aretz, unless anybody who can list off the extended Sperling family of Washington, D.C. over the last 50 years, Kanai 10 extra points. That I'll give. Verse 23, V'chi savo'u el ha'aretz, when you come into the land, untatem kol eitz machol, and you plant any type of fruit tree, va'araltem or laso es pirio, and you should treat the fruit of the tree as orla, which means you're not allowed to eat the fruits of the first 3 years of the tree. And that's halacha of orla. That, by the way, is halacha in the diaspora as well. Now, normally it's not that relevant because normally it takes a tree a while to generate good fruit in the first place. But it is theoretically relevant. If a person plants a tree in their backyard, I'll tell you one that's a real shiloh. You have to get a little bit into details. Sometimes you could go into the hardware store. I forgot the term for it, but you can buy a tree that's like already a rooted tree, and you kind of take it in its dirt. Again, I'm not remembering the technical terms. There are real shilas about how that works in terms of orla. In other words, when you replant it, does the clock start over at that time? Not. There are good articles about it. If anyone's doing it, you can always feel free to discuss it with me. But that probably is at least possibly a very real application of orla. It's a very interesting thing. God gives us a world to benefit from, to take pleasure in, and we plant trees in this world. And all of a sudden, God says, but you can't eat fruit from it for the first 3 years. Why not? I should also mention, just so there's not confusion, there's a unique halacha in the 4th year. So the first 3 years, you're not allowed to eat the fruit at all. The 4th year, the fruit of the 4th year is to be eaten in Yerushalayim. And if you're not going to eat in Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to eat it either, unless you transfer the sanctity onto money and then you take the money to Yerushalayim. A whole complicated thing. Let's see the Ramban on Pasuk Kaf Gimel. It's about 10 lines into the Ramban. In mine, it's a new paragraph. V'tam ha-mitzvah zos. And the reason for this mitzvah of Orlav, the first 3 years of the fruit being prohibited, l'chabed es Hashem me'reishis kol tfuasenu, to honor God from the first of our fruits, mepri ha'etz utfuas hakerem, from the fruit of the tree and the produce of the vineyard, v'lo nochal mehem, and we should not eat from them, ad shenavi kol pri shana achas hilulum l'Hashem, until we bring a fruit, until we bring a fruit for 1 year as praise to God. We shouldn't be sitting eating Sunday morning brunch fruit at our table if we haven't given the fruit to God first in some way. The fruits of the first 3 years aren't particularly good, because it's there's not many of them. The produce of the first 3 years is not particularly great in quantity or great in quality. Most trees don't really start generating fruits until the 4th year. Therefore, for all trees, we wait. We don't partake of the fruit. So the Ramban says, I don't want to partake of the fruits until I share the fruits with God in some way. What's the manner in which I share the fruits with God? That 4th year, I take the fruit and I eat it in Yerushalayim. It's not a korban, it's not a sacrifice. I eat it, but the fact that I'm eating in Yerushalayim is my expression of thanks to God for his beautiful fruits. Now, we don't want that eating in Yerushalayim to be of fruits that are only so-so. So we wait until the 4th year. The 4th year, I take the fruit and I eat in Yerushalayim. And that's my thanks to God. And then and only then may I begin to partake of the fruit in a regular way. That, says the Ramban, is the rationale for the concept of Orla and what's called Neta Revoy or Kerem Revoy, which are the unique halachos of the 4th year. So again, we discussed the Ramban's concept of the Ahavta Re'echa Kamocha, and we discussed the Ramban regarding Orla.